Address Day at CAnD3. My name is Amélie Quenel-Vallée. I am the director of CAnD3 and a professor here at McGill University. And so here today, what we have for you is our annual keynote address, which we will get on with shortly. Then we will have some rapid fire poster presentations with the actual posters being in the hall over there and being shown over lunch during the lunch and poster sessions. So just to whet your appetite and encourage you to join our poster presenters. And then we will have the Dragons Den finals. So we're very excited to see those presentations and have you watch them and also rate them. And we will have then a coffee break and another moment to get at your poster session in our partners and fellow showcase. So when our fellows are joining our partners for internships and they will tell us a little bit about their experience. And then with that, we will close with a cocktail mixer with all of us together here in person. So first, I would be remiss if I didn't thank all the partners who have made this great journey possible. So this is a bit of a bittersweet moment. We're bringing in our last cohort, but it's also already been 5 full years, 5 beautiful years, and our 6th year is underway. And all the partners have made this possible here are listed, 39 partners and counting. And of course, hosted at McGill University and funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Mais tout d'abord, je tiens à commencer en reconnaissant que nous sommes réunis sur le territoire traditionnel des Kanien'kehá:ka, le nom que le peuple Mohawk utilise pour se désigner dans sa propre langue, qui signifie le peuple de la pierre à feu. Et les Kanien'kehá:ka sont des gardiens des terres et des eaux de Tiohtià:ke, aussi connus sous le nom de Montréal. So this was French acknowledgement of our land and territory. And as CAnD3 is a pan-Canadian and international initiative, we do recognize the diverse Indigenous peoples that whose lands we work on and we have the privilege of living with. And I just wanted, he is not here today, but I also just did want to acknowledge that this summer, we are very privileged to participate in the Impress initiative at McGill, which is supporting the participation of Indigenous youth and scholars in our research activity. And so we have Mason Dicker, who is coming from the Nain Inuit Nation, who some of you have already met and is working with us as an intern this summer. And so he has actually Impress activities today. And so if he had been here, I would have asked him to do this in an acknowledgement. But we're very, very privileged to have him. And as a special, also I want to say from my personal experience as a supervisor for this internship, I had the privilege of participating along with Céline Lee in a blanket exercise. And this was just such a moving exercise. And so if you ever have the opportunity, if you're invited for one of these exercises, I would really, really highly recommend it. It helps us, many of these facts are known, but to be able to live it in the embodied way in which territory has been rescinded and slowly encroached in a way that is not, of course, respectful of ancestral lands and practices and customs is also very, it's very touching and very moving. And I think in a way, I'm going to make the bridge to the connection of what we're talking about today. So pain, some of these experiences are clearly individual, being embodied, the interaction with the environment. And I think this is something that we need to understand a lot more about. And so being able to connect in that way is really a privilege. Okay. So on that, I want to bring us to the Q&A, the rules of engagement. So our speaker will speak for the better part of 40 minutes. And so if you have a question, please put it in the chat, a Q&A box anytime during the presentation, or raise your hand during the Q&A segment. And we will ask you to introduce yourself and your affiliation. So on that, with that housekeeping out of the way, it is my great pleasure to introduce not only an amazing scholar, but someone I consider a dear friend. and a colleague, Anna Zajacova, who is a professor of sociology at the University of Western Ontario. Her research examines chronic pain, focusing on its social determinants and consequences, among many other topics. So her work is broad-ranging, but today and recently she's been making real headway in this area. And looking at the disparities between Canadian and American adults. And since earning her PhD in demography in sociology from Princeton University, she's published over 90 studies in leading journals such as Pain, the Journal of Pain, and Demography. Her work, funded by the US National Institutes of Health and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, explores how pain fits into broader population health patterns. And so on that, without further ado, Anna, I am gonna bring this over. Sorry, we had a Q&A misplaced slide. It's okay, it's all good. The slides are back in order. So I'll invite you to the stand. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I have my trusty timer myself, so. Okay. All right, well, hi everyone. Amelie, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, to meet a lot of you, to see some familiar faces. And also it's been a genuine pleasure and privilege to watch and help in small way this incredible enterprise that you've developed here. Incredibly innovative, important. And for those of you who are starting the cohort, you're in for a really amazing year. All right, so let's start here. Burning, suffocating, miserable, grueling, terrifying, vicious, blinding, crushing, drilling, scalding, punishing, throbbing, shooting, pulsing, stabbing. It's pretty dramatic. What is it? These are actually descriptors of pain that are used on one of the most widely used, oldest and still widely used pain questionnaire, which very appropriately was developed right here at McGill in 1975 by psychologist Ron Melzack. There are more of these descriptors. So any condition that is measured with descriptors like these behooves us to study it and understand it well. Moreover, I'll sort of invite you to look around and think, who around here has chronic pain right now? You can't tell. Chronic pain is a hidden and invisible condition, and it is very challenging to study, very difficult to measure it. But again, that does not mean we should be shying away from the challenge. So think of this presentation as sort of a love letter to research on chronic pain. Before I start, two digression slides. One, an important thank you to my team, my core collaborators, Hannah Grohl-Prokopczyk at University of Buffalo and Zach Zimmer at Mount St. Vincent U, our amazing collaborators and fantastic postdocs and student trainees, current and former, some of whom are now faculty, some of whom are like Merita, my student is finishing up her PhD in just 4 years while finishing another PhD during that entire time, and funding without which this would not be possible. In terms of what type of a talk to expect, I'm sort of going to distill what we've learned over the past 5 years. So I'm not going to go deep into any specific paper, result. This is going to be a very broad overview talk. The central thesis of it is that chronic pain should be considered a holistic, sensitive barometer of population health. Chronic pain is very expensive. It's very impactful. It's prevalent. Moreover, the prevalence seems to be increasing. Chronic pain is not just a physical condition. it has very, very close ties to our mental well-being, bidirectional. I'm not going to be talking about that much, but it's very important to keep that in mind. And for us as social scientists, chronic pain is not just biological phenomenon, it is deeply shaped by social context, the world we live in, both at the individual level and at the macro level. So we can see that in terms of geographic disparities. Despite its importance, we population health scholars have really neglected chronic pain. And that is bad because we know very little. But for us and for you guys as junior scholars, that means that chronic pain is a really wide open frontier to explore. And you can do a lot of really important research in this area. All right, so the talk itself will proceed in 4 stages. So here's a little roadmap. First, I will give an overview of the nature of chronic pain, just so that we know what we're talking about. And then I'll dive into stuff that I'm working on, which is demographic context and what I think of as social fault lines or the social context of pain. And finally, as a conclusion, I will come back to this idea of chronic pain as a frontier for population health research. So let's get started. Pain has always been with us. And so not surprisingly, there's been theories and thinking about pain throughout history. Ancient Egypt has been actually quite advanced in treating chronic pain. And ancient Greece and Rome has learned a lot from Egypt about pain and its treatment. Going back a number of further centuries, chronic pain is central to many, many religions, but probably none as much as Christianity, where sort of the suffering of Jesus on the cross is at the core of Christianity. Now, a lot of thinking was therefore sort of based in religious thinking or sort of religious perspective. Things changed quite dramatically in the mid-17th century. René Descartes, the one of, I think, therefore I am, and Cartesian coordinates, which you all fondly remember from your math classes, also produced one of the most important developments on pain, where he developed the idea of pain as a sort of mechanistic sensation. So there is some source of pain, and along these, they didn't understand, or the notion of nerves wasn't established yet, but sort of along some kind of paths, it gets understood. The fact that pain is actually felt in the brain, it was in and of itself very novel. This mechanistic understanding, though, has persisted basically until now broadly, but for centuries, until to the year almost 300 years later, when Ron Melzack here at McGill and Patrick Wald, a British neuroscientist, have proposed the gate control theory. You may not have heard of this theory, but you all practice it. Have you ever got a paper cut? Get a paper cut and you go like this? Does that look familiar? Why do we do that? Why do we rub near the injury? So the idea is that pain signals go to the spinal cord, but they compete with non-painful signals along different nerve fibers. And there is a gate in the spinal cord where the non-painful signals have the ability to inhibit the painful signals from being transmitted to your brain. That's why you try to compete with your painful signals. But there was something else to this gate control theory, and that was this absolutely paradigm shifting notion that not only is the brain a passive recipient of the pain signals, but it is actually an active participant that shapes pain by descending pathways. Again, a sort of a quintessential example would be soldiers gravely injured in the battle, but feeling no pain until much later, right? That's your brain's ability to inhibit pain. Currently, to simplify drastically, and the role of brain has been sort of strengthened into the neuromatrix model. The matrix meaning there are multiple centers in the brain, a matrix of pain centers in the brain that jointly work together to produce the pain experience or modulate the pain experience. We're not going to be, this is population health stuff, we're not going to be talking about that. The biopsychosocial model has been a really important development which dominates now. I'll come back to this figure. This is the biopsychosocial model. The most important thing is that now everybody studying pain fully understands that the psychological and social factors are critical to pain, not just sort of purely biomedical understanding. All right, so now I have a very, very simple question. You want to like a little quiz to try to answer it? You all know it when we feel it, don't we? How would you define it? So I'll spare you the misery, give you the official definition. ISP, the International Association for Study of Pain, defines pain as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with damage, but it's not just associated with damage, associated with actual or just potential tissue damage, and not even that, associated with or resembling that associated with it. In other words, chronic pain may not even be linked to any tissue damage. It just is. And a lot of chronic pain, in fact, that we suffer with is of that nature. Now, what is chronic pain? Because that's what I study. So the common operationalization is pain that lasts for a long time, and we typically use 3 months or 6 months. Sources will differ. What is important is that chronic pain and acute pain are two different beasts. Acute pain is healthy, necessary. Without acute pain, people who do not feel acute pain, there are people with, who are born without the ability to feel pain, they tend to die young. One way to think about it is it's an important fire alarm. You've injured yourself, the pain will tell you to keep an eye on that part, body part, and heal it. Chronic pain, however, is a very different situation. It's a maladaptive pathological dysfunction of the nervous system, or specifically of the pain system in the central nervous system. Think of it as a fire alarm that keeps going and going and ringing, even though there is no fire. Okay? In fact, the two different types of pain have different signatures in the brain. So there are different biological phenomena. Chronic pain is not just a symptom of a disease. This is one of the reasons why I think it's been studied so little in population health, because it's being viewed as just that. But now chronic pain is fully recognized as an independent disease. It's encoded in ICD-11, the International Classification of Diseases, where different types of primary pain are now listed. And this is really important, because if we're not naming things, then we can't study them. So these critical new developments have occurred in different fields in terms of chronic pain. So how big of a deal is pain? Huge. Pain affects more people than heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, our top 3 combined. It's the main reason why we go see a doctor, by far. Very important for the healthcare system. It's also by far the leading cause of disability, whether in Canada or worldwide. It's very costly. In terms of the numbers, we don't have numbers for Canada. For the US, we have this number. Every time I look at it, I go back to the Gaskin and Richard paper. I'm like, I must be making this up. No. Do I have extra zeros in there? No, it's over $600 billion annually in the US only. And this is from 2012 using 2010 data, 2010 US dollars. So the number is much, much higher now. And it's certainly not lower in Canada proportionately. And chronic pain is linked to the opioid crisis. It's linked to rising mental health problems and suicide rates even, and just generally declining health, especially for midlife adults. So given this, commensurately, when you look at Google Scholar for chronic pain, you will get 1.7 million hits. So is there anything left to study? Well, yes. And moreover, for us, we should be aware that most of what you see, vast majority, is biomedical or clinical and psychological. Where's Jax? We just, okay, there. But very little from population health perspective. In fact, it's really, really sort of pathetic. Since 2000, when you look at journals, and I have done that, the search yesterday, just to make sure, Social Science and Medicine Population Health published all of 4 studies with pain in the title. Not just chronic pain, just anything. It says pain. And they're the winner because Demography published all of 2. One is from us. And PDR, PRP are our top demography journals. And I just threw in some Canadian journals. Grand total of 0. Okay. Now, why did we not study chronic pain? Well, one of the reasons maybe that what I've alluded to, maybe it's just a symptom of condition. There's another problem, and we've already tackled that a little bit during the Q&A. Pain is deeply subjective. Here is a quote. To have great pain is to have certainty. To hear that another person has pain is to have doubt. The only way we can know pain is what somebody tells us. In other words, pain is really difficult to measure. But this should be sort of a plus for us in the audience. So pain is necessarily self-reported. There are no objective measures or biomarkers or signatures, biological signatures. There's been a lot of effort put into measuring pain sort of as objectively as humanly possible. You're probably familiar with one or another version of the pain scale with smileys or faces or that's used in clinical setting. There are brain imaging studies that try to get at the signature. That's obviously not scalable. There are studies that try to look at people's facial expressions of pain. That's actually very important, both actually not just for humans, but for non-human subjects like animals, but also for people if they're, say, developmental disabled or the elderly, to understand whether they're suffering pain. None of these is feasible for population studies. So again, the upshot is people like us have competitive advantage here. That's what we do, measuring things by asking people about their health. Okay, so let's now start looking at basic questions. So how prevalent is chronic pain? That's the sort of your standard question that you start with exploring any phenomenon. Well, as I'll show you just now, everything when it comes to pain gets complicated quickly because the answer depends on what questions people were asked. And because we're sort of new to this as a field, everybody asks it differently. So the CCHS, the Canadian Community Health Survey, asks, are you usually free of pain or discomfort? Lisa asks, that's another Canadian data set, do you have pain that's always present? NHIS, in the past 3 months, how often did you have pain? HRS, are you often troubled with pain? Or questions are asked with respect to specific body parts. So, do you have problems or have you had pain in this body part, that body part, etc. And this is just a sampling. These questions will elicit responses differently. But I would say the most research that's been done use the NHIS, and this is sort of a US complement to the Canadian Community Health Survey. So think CCHS. And chronic pain is defined as pain experienced on most days or every day. So with that, what has been the scope of this epidemic? The one number, if you remember one number from this talk, this would be 1 out of 5. 1 out of 5 Canadian adults, 1 out of 5 US adults have chronic pain, roughly. Okay. This varies quite broadly across different population groups, but 20% if we need to get started. Now, when you say chronic pain, like you all, headaches, what are we talking about? So in terms of where it hurts, we actually do know that distribution. This happens to be from a paper that Marcus Schaefer and I just published. This is US older adults. And this is called a pain mannequin body map that is used to represent pain. And the most common single site of pain worldwide, almost in every population, is low back pain. Probably is not going to surprise many of us here. What is maybe going to surprise many of us here is that 80 to 90% of chronic low back pain is considered primary. That means it's not attributable to a visible, obvious disease etiology or structural damage. Okay, so most of pain is not due to a disc or something like that. It just is. But I should also point out that for most people who have pain, they have pain in multiple body sites. So that would be typical. And I should, for younger adults, since this is the audience here, headaches, migraines, and abdominal pelvic pain are fairly prevalent as well. Okay. Now, how has all this changed over time? So what has been pain trends? We don't know anything about older pain trends. Again, remember, we need pain questions in population surveys, and they just weren't there. What happened since? In the early 21st century, we've had very, very consistent reports of pain increases, whether in the US, whether in Europe, in Canada as well. This is actually sort of similar to a Schuppler 2019 paper, but it's my own summary. Why did pain increase? Well, it's very clear that increasing obesity played a role. Very likely sort of increased economic distress, psychological distress, but all of these only explain part of it. So potentially changes in healthcare, especially use of opioids, may play a role. And something that we've already tackled, potentially changes in reporting and other factors. Now, one thing that you may notice, especially when I zero in on that, is what happens sort of towards the end of this period, sort of the teens. These increases in pain slow down or even appeared to reverse. This is wonderful news. It was wonderful news until COVID hits. There is a lot of concern. So early COVID articles are starting to come out. This is going to really increase pain through multiple mechanisms. So we have a paper that's going to hopefully be soon accepted in pain about what happened. So this is sort of hot off the presses, more or less. In 2019, the prevalence of pain is 20%. We've already established that, nothing new. Deep into COVID 2021, how much has pain increased? It did not. It did not at all. In fact, for high impact chronic pain, it decreased significantly. So this is wonderful. And in 2023, post-COVID, we should see the same, except no. In 2023, pain shoots up. This difference may not look that huge on this small graph, but it's 4 percentage points. That means that 20% prevalence I showed you may no longer apply. That prevalence may now be 24%. That's 10 million more US adults, or if this applies in Canada, 1 million extra Canadian adults with chronic pain. Which groups were affected most? We looked at men, women, younger, older, less. We looked at many different groups. I'm just going to show you a smattering because the result is Everybody reacted the same. There's something widespread, something systemic. So what is it? We looked at a number of social factors and economic factors. They didn't explain it. Long COVID is very strongly related to pain. After all, pain is one of the diagnostic criteria for long COVID. But long COVID only explained about 13 to 14% of this increase. Most of it is due to something else. So pain is prevalent and seems to be increasing further. Moreover, what I want to show you is, again, further sort of focus on that social and show you some of the social fault lines. I'm only going to show you two examples. One is race and ethnic disparities, and one is geographic disparities. So what are we seeing in terms of race and ethnic disparities in pain? This is going to be first US adults. And this is a paper that we published, what was it, 2023, 2022, something like that. Now, what was known before our paper was a lot about US comparing non-Hispanic white and Black adults, sometimes Hispanic adults. A lot of literature on that. What we found that these three groups were sort of neck and neck. There weren't much of a difference. Now contrast that with the about half the prevalence of pain among Asian Americans. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have a sky-high prevalence among Native Americans. So that's US terminology for indigenous and multiracial. So we did not expect these differences. And in fact, when we, so some of them were, not all, but some were due to, so here I'm adding my controls. So some of them were due to primarily education and income. So without them, with them, okay? But some of those differences remain significant. What about in Canada? Would we see something similar, something different? Here with the groups are somewhat different. The result, this is from a recently accepted paper at the Canadian Journal of Pain that Merita Limani led. And when we look at the comparison of white versus Black Canadians, now Black Canadians have lower prevalence of chronic pain than whites. East Asian have the least, but South Asian have quite a bit. Indigenous Canadians have the highest prevalence of chronic pain. But this is just sort of, this is frequency based. Do you have pain frequently? But what if you say, yeah, yes, I have pain frequently. We also ask you, do you have a lot of pain? Do you have disabling pain, interfering pain, pain that interferes with your activities? And when we do, we get quite a different picture. For chronic pain as such, Indigenous Canadians prevalence. But for this really disabling, interfering pain, it's South Asian Canadians, especially women. This is all South Asian women and Black Canadians. So what we are seeing are these large disparities where it's clear that pain reflects inequalities that are happening in our societies, with tremendous disparities across groups, but it's not a simple story. It's not a simple story where, say, visible minorities or Indigenous Canadians or Native Americans have high pain. There's a lot more complexity, and moreover, the patterns vary by gender and also by how we ask about pain. We also know that social and economic mechanisms explain part of the differences. But again, there's a lot of interesting, unexpected findings. For instance, we asked about experience discrimination among Canadian adults. Experience discrimination had a huge impact on pain, but had zero effect on explaining these disparities. Lots of open questions. Okay, now this was sort of individual level social factors. But geographic pain disparities are particularly important to us because they hint at the macro level context. So here, what I'll show you is result from a data that we collected in 2020. We called it the resilience. It was COVID related, but we were able to put pain questions on this. And the other really unique thing is that we had both US and Canadian adults. We were able to map, therefore, pain both across Canadian provinces and US states. We had that information. Now, big caveat, 4,200 people is not a lot. So that's a huge caveat here. Nonetheless, what did we see? This is the pattern we are seeing. First, when you look at Canada, it's all relatively low pain, especially compared to the US. Now, some of you may be noticing this Newfoundland Labrador little uptick. To some degree, this is because it's an older population. So we can control for age and sex. And when we control for age and sex, you can sort of see that that takes away some of that Newfoundland and Labrador difference, right? Sorry, this one. Here we go. Okay. But it does nothing to explaining what's happening in the US. So when you look at this broad macro level characteristics, overall, Canadian adults have less pain. This is really important because we ask the questions the same time, same way, same language, okay? And Canadians had less pain than the US adults. Why? This was fully explained by economic hardship among Americans. But even taking into account economic hardship, we found these pain hotspots. They occurred in the South, in the deep South, and to some degree with Appalachia, and here we have a little bit in the West. And those just sit there, completely immune to any controls we threw at it. So what that suggests is that there are some macro level drivers. Context, which is driven by policies and political decisions. And to go back to that caveat that I told you, this is small data. There's some weirdness going on in Louisiana, which I think is sort of an outlier here. We also have similar results for arthritis pain. This was with BRFA's data, which is hundreds of thousands of people at the county level. And you can see similar sort of this hotspotting here in the deep South and in the Appalachia, maybe to some lesser degree in the West. So what these geographic disparities are really powerfully showing is that pain is not just biology or individual behaviors. It is also policy and context. So we've done a lot more of this work, but we have explored disparities across gender, sexual orientation, education, etc. But again, there are always a mix of what you might expect in terms of large disparities and also some unexpected findings, which I'm happy to chat about. But it's time to wrap up. So I'm going to sort of bring it home to thinking about what this means for us as population health scholars. So I hope that I persuaded you that chronic pain is a really important problem. You're young. You probably, most of you are not currently having any chronic pain issues, but I'm very sorry to tell you, it is not very likely that you will live your life without being affected by chronic pain yourself or indirectly by having a loved one suffering with chronic pain. But even without that, many of you here are studying different population health questions, such as disability. And what is startling is that in population health treatment of disability, we've sort of ignored pain. So this is the standard disablement model by Verbrugge and Jetty, where, say, disease, think arthritis, is causing an impairment, swelling and inflammation in the joints, which causes limitations such as difficulty climbing stairs, which may lead to disability such as a person needs to quit their job or retire because they're not able to keep up with their social roles, and potentially death. Why does a person need to quit their job because they have arthritis? Why do they have difficulty climbing stairs? Because of pain. But there is some disability, blindness, so sensory, for instance, where pain may not be involved at all. But the vast majority of disability is a direct result of pain. And yet, when you look at these, not mine, but the classic studies, pain does not appear, or then only parenthetically. So we need to do a better job bringing pain into our understanding of disability. Now, you're also junior scholars and you need to publish in order to develop your careers. So I'm also going to tell you that there is a tremendous need for this type of research. So just to illustrate, this is sort of a braggy slide, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be a hugely encouraging slide for all of us. Pain is the world's leading journal on pain research. Their acceptance rate is well below 15%. We've sent 13 papers there, got 12 accepted. Of those, a quarter got selected, and a third got selected as an editor's choice with invited commentary, et cetera, et cetera. That's not because we're doing some amazing work. Some of our data are shoddy, some, like we're the same people who are desperately trying to publish in JHSB and SSM and getting rejected just like everybody else. So there is just very, very little out there from population health perspective. And specifically where we can contribute is that social and that biopsychosocial model. Do you remember when I showed you this biopsychosocial model way back when you were still fresh and processed? So this is that same picture. This is a capture from a 2007 paper which has been cited more than 2,000 times. It's one of the seminal papers laying out the biopsychosocial model of pain. Notice this biological and psychological window, well thought out, thinking through the mechanisms. And then we have the social window. Notice what's included. Activities of daily living. Wait, that's not a social driver. That's a measure of disability. Environmental stressors, yeah, interpersonal, family, work history, maybe, prior treatment experiences. It just doesn't feel well thought out. So, and of course, when we start talking biology and neuroscience, we sound like that in reverse. It's normal. But point is, there's just very little that has contributed to that social aspect. And we know how to do that because we know how to think about individual level characteristics, which are grounded in mesolevel interpersonal, like family context. But even further, and this is still done quite a bit, say, in psychology, but the macro level structural characteristics like unemployment, like social welfare supports are things that we understand the importance of, and they're really new. And I should also probably say that we also understand this global historical context, such as population, such as population aging, which drives a lot of the increase in pain. All right. Global historical context, the availability of opioids, their prescription guidelines, the ability of our healthcare systems to provide alternative ways of combating pain, all of that goes here. So we have a lot to offer. And so I will just conclude on a couple of points just to review. Chronic pain is this really, really unique measure at the crossroads of physical and mental health, and policies, politics, not just healthcare, but otherwise broad political environment, and inequalities experienced in all our societies. It is also a really big deal health problem. It is difficult to study. It is invisible in multiple ways, in how people experience it, being very subjective, and also with data still being quite sparse. Nonetheless, we claim that it is sort of a really holistic barometer of population health and shaped by social context. So for all of you who are looking for innovative, impactful